Hi, this is Louis Paul. Welcome to another episode of the Colors of Prog. This is season 6, episode 6. Been a while. I've been doing research for shows to do, what kind of music to cover, and we mix it up a little bit just so no one gets bored. There's plenty of progressive rock music out there, old and new, to cover. But this time, I'm going to discuss Roxy music. I'm calling this one Roxy Music, Do the Strand. One of the strangest bands to straddle the very edges of what is thought as progressive music and progressive rock music is Roxy Music. And they've been called many things, more often pioneers of art rock. But their music is altogether not easily classifiable. Brian Ferry, the singer, brings a love for French chanson songs. Think Serge Gainsbourg or Charles Aznavour, and his suave sing-song, devilish speak delivery kind of follows that line. Ed in old British music hall theatrics and his love for fashionable clothing, part British dandy, part sequin Yves Saint Laurent from outer space. Brian Eno, for the first two albums at least, brought to the table a desire to bring his interest in avant-garde music and experimental sounds to accompany everything with his uh, unusual synthesizers and keyboards. And we have Phil Manzanera, the guitarist of Latin American, Cuban, and Hawaiian origins, and the band's secret weapon, who remains to this day one very underrated guitar player. He has a uniquely original sound, loud, rhythmic, chunky, with stinging lead notes that almost, and at times do, ring a tone. Then we have Andy Mackay, that's how his name is pronounced, whose saxophone and oboe work adds delicate touches of color to the music. And then Graham Simpson on bass, for the first album at least, and Paul Thompson on drums. So Roxy Music performed in 1971, and the self-titled Roxy Music was released on Island Records in 1972. There is pretty much nothing like this from this date in music. And here's the album. Remake Remodel starts things off, and for 45 minutes or thereabouts, you're on a whirlwind tour of sounds and the highlights from the Roxy Music debut album, which I just showed you. Beside Remake Our Ladytron, If There Is Something Else, Would You Believe? And what was surely could be called a pre-punk pop tune in the anarchic Virginia Plain. The debut also began a odd history of the band releasing recordings with women in fetishistic clothing, unusual poses, or in for distress. Nearly all of them are girlfriends of Brian Ferry at one time or another. Carrie Ann Mueller is the model on the cover of the first album, Roxy Music. It's Carrie Ann Mueller. The band posed for the gatefold inner sleeve. And yeah, Brian Eno with hair. Actress, model, and sometimes singer Amanda Lear graces the cover of 1973's For Your Pleasure. Uh, she's dressed like a goth chanteuse walking a hellhound. You can't see the hellhound very clear due to the glare, but sorry about that. For Your Pleasure features the same band as on the debut, with the exception of John Porter, now on bass. A fine follow-up to the first Roxy Music album, and equally eccentric. Do the Strand kicks things off with a, typically for them at this point, part crooner, part proto-punk delivery with an odd Stonesy rhythm going on. Imagine it and it doesn't work. Hearing it and it does. Probably more uneven than the debut Roxy Music album, but the speeded up rave of Editions of You into a rave up with a honking saxophone and a gloomy "In Every Dream There's a Heartache" is the kind of tune the late David Lynch would use to punctuate one of his more macabre, not your average everyday American home life films. And that one, "In Every Dream, a Heartache," is most likely one of their best and unusual songs. Stranded, also released in 1973, features a reclining Marilyn Cole in an obviously wet magenta-colored gown clinging to her body, reclining on the grass. What grass, I don't know. Yep, Roxy Music continues with the decade imagery. So there's that cover. And it folds out like so. Oh, and Eddie Jobson replaces Brian Eno. But Jobson also had his equally eccentric approach to keyboard playing and manipulating electronic sounds. It makes him a good fit. Now, for this album, things take off with another mid-tempo rocker, Street Life, and there are more quirky diversions here, like the nearly 9-minute Psalm, which again mines territory very few musical artists were delving with at the time. Heartbreak, loss, and revenge, all woven into a song so disarming it sneaks up on you. We also have the 1-2 punch of A Song for Europe and Mother of Pearl, two of my personal favorites from the Roxy Music discography. Country Life, released in 1974, also features one of the most censored album covers in the Roxy canon and in music period. Models Constance Caroli and Everline Grunwald in wet underwear, and one of them topless, also standing in front of fake foliage. At times, this album was sold in a brown paper bag, hiding the cover. Then the album was released with just the shot of the foliage, no models appearing, and they were removed. And you really had to look around to see if you could find the Country Life album. This is the original. And you could see why he was banned. A 70s thing is alluring women, and it was Brian Ferry's girlfriends at the time, so he could do what he wanted. Back to the record. As on previous releases, Roxy must have determined what the most driving song to kick off the album would be. And The Thrill of It All is an all-time classic Roxy song. As on Stranded, the previous album, The collection of songs are good, but a little uneven. But there's no denying the absolute thrill of the back-to-back All I Want Is You and Out of the Blue. Two live concert staples that Roxy and Ferry solo and even Phil Manzanera would feature in their music sets. Brings us to Siren. Siren, released in 1975, is another Roxy Music's best albums. This time, Jerry Hall, future girlfriend and then wife of Mick Jagger, who was Ferry's girlfriend at the time, appears stranded, crawling on rocks by the sea during the night. Not quite a mermaid, although someone attached gills to the back of her feet, which is true. And I don't know if you could see those gills. And she wears a crown like an Atlantean queen. So, album covers of the 70s. Siren kicks off with what is perhaps Roxy's first crossover hit, Love is the Drug, a very popular song in remixed versions and in the early disco years, both gay and straight. There's a lot to like here, but as in previous Roxy albums, there's also two songs that they stitch together. It seems to be a thing. Almost every one of the Roxy albums has two songs back to back that are the power of the record. In this instance, it was Could It Happen to Me and Both Ends Burning. But there's also glimpses into one could perceive as a change in the band's musical landscape, as Ferry had an uneven solo career at this time, which continued for decades and still continues. So the songs started to become more danceable, like a slow disco tune. Trust me, if you followed Roxy up to this point, you'll hear it. Which brings us to Manifesto, 1979. There were a couple of years off there, weren't there? Eddie Jobson is gone, replaced by Paul Carrack from Squeeze and quite a few session musicians, including Luther Vandross on backing vocals before he would hit it big as a solo artist. This probably is around the time he was primarily working also with David Bowie as a backup singer. Manifesto consists of mostly slow beat disco dance songs. But there were two breakout smash hits on this one. Even though it's a rather uneven disc, I've said that about almost every one of them. Ain't That So and Dance Away. Oh, and the album cover is some macabre Mardi Gras looking photo from a shoot at a decadent disco. Not one of their best. Now, Flesh and Blood followed in 1980. It's an odd one. Brian Ferry has had a solo career of albums, and he's doing that solo career. He's done many cover tunes. Al Green, Bob Dylan. He even did quite a few Bob Dylan. He did a whole Bob Dylan tribute album covering his music. So it's a bit of a surprise that the seventh Roxy Music album consists of cover songs. In the Midnight Hour, Oh Yeah, 8 Miles High, etc. And the core band is reduced to a trio of Brian Ferry, Phil Manzanera, and Andy Mackay, with help from many session musicians. Still, they managed to pull it together for two typical sounding Roxy songs, My Only Love and Over You. Now, by then, the post-punk new romantic era of music was shaking up sounds all over. using those bands were using a battery of synthesizers, overdub vocals, resulting in some pretty catchy tunes. I mean, everybody from Soft Cell, Tainted Love, to other new romantic bands were really making a new sound. And it kind of made bands like Roxy Music a little redundant. Bring us to Avalon. Released in 1982, until now, the last Roxy Music studio album. There's that. Now, you can't see this for the glare. Once again, it's a tribute to the core founding members, Ferry, Manzanera, Mackay, and session musicians. But this time, for the last album, they still managed to pull at least 3 spinnable and highly listenable tunes. That's more than some other bands have managed to do. I mean, it's few and far between. Every song is amazing. There are those that exist. Progressive music, rock music, country music, jazz music, But for a band as uniquely different as Roxy Music, what we have to say, because of the way their music is, art rock, progressive, strange pop, they had a really different sound, a very unique sound. So they managed to make, record and deliver songs that are incredibly earworms. It's like, wow, that's a really good song. Then there's nothing else on there that side like that. So when I say, as I said before, that they matched, sometimes there's one at the beginning, blasting off the album with a really great track, and halfway through there are 2 songs together that sound great. In this case, More Than This, the song Avalon, and While My Heart Is Still Beating. So they got 3 on this one. I kind of missed the outrageous, probably then and now non-PC album covers. Instead, we have a anonymously helmeted person with a hawk on their arm overlooking the sea, and that's what we get on this one. But strangely enough, there's not a lot of Roxy Music live albums officially released. As of this recording, several early tour recordings are starting to surface, but some sound sourced from soundboards and some from radio simulcasts, no doubt recorded on archaic cassette tapes at the time of the airing. I'm saying that officially. Viva Roxy Music, originally released on the Acco label in 1976 as a single vinyl LP, is an okay representation of the band, but liner notes were minimal, and it didn't sound great. An overdue sound restoration was released on CD by EMI in 2003, but apparently those have all disappeared by now, over 20 years later. And you might find one somewhere. Heart Still Beating was released in 1990, but it's actually a recording dating from a live show in 1982. And today is kind of scarce. You might find it in remainder bins, but again, it's not a great Roxy Music live album. The same thing for the next one, Concerto. It's a 2-disc set that was released around the time of the 1979 Manifesto tour. The show was from Denver, Colorado, and Oakland, California. But Concerto was not released till 2001. So it's a 1979 show. It wasn't released until 2001. That's a long time. On the Small Pilot label. It vanished into the ether. Now, The High Road, originally released in 1983, and remember, Avalon was the last studio album till now, and may very well be. The High Road originally released in 83, and then once on CD in 2005, comes from a concert in France. And it's not bad. You probably will have more luck finding the out of print DVD version of that today than the audio release CD from Universal Music. Live at the Apollo in London at the Hammersmith Apollo Theater was recorded in 2001 on one of the last dates of that tour. It's not been officially released as an audio-only recording, but is worth your time since it's a terrific performance to search out the DVD. Now, I do have Roxy Music Live. Released in 2003 by Eagle, and then a subsidiary of Universal Music. It's a terrific, both on LP. I originally bought, that's what that is, the 3-disc vinyl version and the 2-disc CD version. So it was released by Eagle. Again, it's terrific. Recording of Roxy's 2001 tour. Every song you could want is on here. Alas, all audience sounds and have been edited out, so you could barely detect audience chatter or applause or anything like that. Getting back to something else, I'm going to mention briefly some of Roxy's tours. In 1972, Roxy Music played numerous gigs in both Europe and the US. They played Madison Square Garden on December 19th, 1972. They spent the spring and fall of 1973 crisscrossing Europe. The spring of 1974, that's the Country Life Tour, saw a few US dates, not many. Notably, they played the Academy of Music on 14th Street on June 3rd. The fall was spent touring Europe, and the winter of 75, they were back in the US with dead of winter gigs. Late February, they played the Academy of Music. And their 1976 winter tour took them from Norway across Europe, ending in Chicago in late March. No local New York area shows. The 1979 Manifesto tour, which began in February 79, took them across Europe, the US, where they played the Palladium. And that was on the 14th and March 29th. So they played 2 dates at the Palladium on that tour. The show ended in Japan, the tour. The 1980 Flesh and Blood tour saw them crisscrossing Europe, with one of the fewest dates being at the Dr. Pepper Music Festival, for those that remember that. If you live in the East Coast area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the Dr. Pepper Music Festival was, I guess, where the Woolman skating rink area is now and has been for some time. It's in Central Park. They played August 29th. The Avalon tour saw them playing spring through fall throughout Europe, and a May gig at New York's Radio City Music Hall, which I attended. New wave band Modern English was the opener, and Modern English had a big hit everywhere with a very catchy song called I Melt With You. In 2001, with no studio recordings released in nearly 2 decades, they embarked on the Roxy Music Reunion Tour. They played Madison Square Garden on July 26th, but this tour took them from Europe to the US, Australia, Eastern Europe, before ending in the UK. A very brief tour occurred in '83, back-checking, to support the High Road DVD. Let's less than 20 shows. And one was at Jones Beach in Long Island on July 26th, and Radio City Music Hall on July 28th. In 2005, 2006, 2010, and 2011, there were some tours, but they were very short, chiefly in Europe, Australia, and Japan. They stopped coming to America. And except for in 2019, March, Roxy Music were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, played 6 songs at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. And one other thing. So Roxy Music celebrated their 50th anniversary with a tour in the fall of 2022. Pleased I went to that one. They played Madison Square Garden on September 12th, 2022. St. Vincent was the opening band. In July 2024, Phil Manzanera confirmed that they will most likely never play again as a band. And that's a shame. It's a lot of information for you guys today, right? That's a shame because I really enjoy Roxy Music. I think there are a lot of fans out there who really enjoy the band Roxy Music. Phil Manzanera and Andy Mackay have recorded separately and together, and they seem lately to be recording music a lot together. And I'll cover some of those in later shows. I'm going to do a show on Phil, but I don't want to get too close to this one because they're, oh, Roxy Music and Phil Manzanera. So you got Brian Eno, everyone knows. He worked with Fripp, other bands, producer, adding his touches to other music, most notably Talking Heads, So wanted to finish this with a note that if you are a Roxy Music fan, and you might say, well, are there any other bands that sounded like them? Actually, there was, but there was this one other band. It sort of sounded like Roxy Music. They were from England, called Deaf School. Their sound was very close to the Roxy mold, and they recorded 3 albums. Second Honeymoon in 1976, Don't Stop the World in 77, and English Boys, Working Girls in 78. They reformed over the years, but never quite crossed over enough. But if you can find the first 2 Deaf School albums, I highly recommend them, especially Second Honeymoon and Don't Stop the World. I saw them one time as a long time ago as a twofer, vinyl twofer. The first 2 albums were put together. I think I tried to push them to sound like Roxy Music. So there's that. So anyway, that's the show for today. I hope you like it. And I'll be back again soon. Have a great day.